corner. In the neutral corner. In the neutral corner. In the neutral corner.
3, 4. Welcome. You're in the neutral corner. I kind of wanted to do this episode. We're not having a whole lot of local news. SD Dumas is making his UFC debut this weekend against a late notice replacement fighter. I'm going to kind of wait. I've already kind of previewed that a few episodes back, so I'm going to kind of wait to review that on Sunday after the fight's already been over. But actually, this episode, I feel like I'm going to do story time for you guys. And I'm going to give a little bit of an insight to me and who I am in my career. And just do a little kind of story about my little MMA foyer. And go from there, you know. And if you guys like it, I have plenty of more stories. And if you don't, you know, it's okay. There will be plenty of other episodes for you guys to like. When I was 18, well, we'll go back further than that. When I was a young man, I grew up in a really rough household, a really rough upbringing. There was a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, and a lot of violence. And from an early age, I had the outlet of pro wrestling. And I would kind of ignore the things going on in the house or the lack thereof that we had in the house. And I would get lost in this pro wrestling world, this escape of big men, you know, big muscular men who can take care of themselves, you know, who can fight back against their abuser, who you know, can take their own destiny in their hands. It was so like intriguing to me. And looking back on it now, I feel like there was just a bunch of guys like, you know, for me, it was like guys like Eddie Guerrero and Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, guys who, even though it's, you know, all choreographed and even though it's all, you know, predetermined and it's a soap opera, it's no different than someone relating to a movie character and things like that. It's just a very homoerotic, you know, soap opera, if we're being completely honest. It's not why I watched it, but come on, you got bodybuilders rubbing each other with baby oil. It's not, you know. But anyway, and in my life, it was like there was a positive male role model for once, and someone there that, you know, I could watch every week, tune in and watch him overcome the odds and teach, you know, basic things, you know, don't betray your friends, you know, take care of the ones you love and stuff like that. It's usually the guys that I gravitated towards. Well, that turned into a love for fighting in general. And then when I was growing up, I would fight local kids in the neighborhoods. All of us would. It wasn't just like me going to pick up fights. All of us would get together and we'd, you know, just like, we're like 11, 12 years old. Sometime, well, it might have been when we were 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. We were just unsupervised, roaming around the neighborhoods, running through the woods, and then we'd find a good little spot in a field or behind someone's house or in someone's backyard and their parents weren't home, and we would just all fight. And luckily, none of us were super powerful. You know, we were kids, so no one was ever really hurt. You know, yeah, we got lumps on our head and bruises, but we never were like busted open. I mean, it's amazing what you don't think about when you're a kid. Like, now I would never go out and just spar a grown man bare knuckle out in the middle of the road because of the risks of just getting a cut that's just going to delay everything. But as a kid, didn't even think about it. So when I was 11, my parents by then had split up. And I was supposed to do this 50-50 custody thing with them, but my dad went on a bender and was gone for like years. Didn't hear from him, didn't talk to him, nothing. Like a year, maybe a little longer. And my mom had the weight of the world on her shoulders and took it out on me being the oldest. And so when I was 11, I finally was like, I don't want to live here. I'm out of here. It's too much, too much abuse, too much of everything. And I left. and I went and moved in with my grandfather, or my grandmother first for a couple of months, then my grandfather for about a year, then my aunt and uncle. And all this time I'm into pro wrestling, but my pro wrestling, now I'm hitting puberty, and now I'm starting to realize how choreographed wrestling is. And as a young man, you don't relate, oh, this is just like watching a movie. You don't relate that. You're still relating it to a sporting event. And now I'm a young man getting into sports in high school and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, I want real things. And then I started watching MMA. And then I started watching the UFC in particular. And then the perfect timing for me was right around the time I started watching it. Brock Lesnar, who I had watched growing up, made his little transition to MMA. He dipped his toes into the UFC monster machine, and that was just like, oh, cool, I know this guy. I can get behind this guy. Like, I know him. I've heard him talk. Like, I've heard his personality, at least what they scripted for him. So I had this idea of, like, who he was, and at least it was somebody I knew. I didn't just go watch the UFC and not know anybody. And then, so I started watching then. I think that was in, like, 2007. So I was, like, right around 7th, 8th grade. And it was really cool because it was real. So from 7th to 8th grade-ish, so that was about 11, 12-ish, that's when I started wanting to do the fighting thing. And now, because I live with my grandmother, and then I went and lived with my grandfather, and then I went and lived with my aunt and uncle, who all were significantly more high class than my parents. And when I say significantly high class than my parents, they still were very middle class, if not lower middle class. But my parents were just, dirt people. I'm not even trying to be mean. It's just how it is. It's just how it is. It's how I lived for 11 years of my life. It was dirt. It was awful. And so I didn't get into this neighborhood shenanigans, these ruffians, these things like that, where I was fighting and stuff, and they weren't really too keen on me watching it and or doing it. Well, as teenagers get rebellious as they grow up, and especially coming from a home like I did, I was not happy where I was when I was 17. When I was 17, I was living with my aunt and uncle, and looking back, they were just trying to do the best that they could with, a kid that's not theirs, with my aunt's brother's kid, and they were trying to do the best that they could to steer me away from being just like my dad. And I respect them for that. But at 17, your hormones are going crazy. I didn't understand why they were treating me a certain way based on someone else, but I get it now, to an extent. However, once I was 17, I moved in with my girlfriend at the time, her parents. And when I turned 18, I told everybody, I'm going to try to do MMA. I want to do it. And when I had been in high school, I had talked to a bunch of people, and there was a local gym. Everybody knew them. Kids from the school, Martin and Cody and Emily Downs, were all, going there. Or that's what they did. That was their family. That's what they did. And everybody knew who they were in the school. And even though we had maybe never talked and weren't friends, everybody knew who they were. So therefore, I was able to kind of like talk to people and get kind of an idea or whatever. When I had no idea where else to go. So I went there. And at first, my whole goal was, I'm going to graduate high school. I'm going to join the Navy and, go about my life and see where this takes me. And I joined the gym because when I graduated high school, I was 257 pounds because I was an offensive lineman. And the Navy was like, yo, bro, we need you to lose a lot of weight. So I joined the MMA thing in the boxing club, and I joined AMA, or Pensacola Boxing Academy. I joined them in order to start to lose the weight so I could go to so I could go to boot camp, so I could go to MEPS, get my job, take my ASVAB, do all that stuff. And which I ended up taking my ASVAB, and I scored pretty high on the ASVAB. I mean, not super high, little. I mean, I think I scored a 70 something, somewhere in the upper 70s. So not super high, but you know, whatever. So I was excited, and I wanted to do it. But at some point, the recruiter and myself lost contact, and when I'd go by the recruiting office, they weren't there. And then the more I started to think about it, and the more I trained, the more I fell in love with fighting, and the more I wanted to just stay home. And you know, I had married my girlfriend, which may have been the reason they stopped talking to me or whatever. But pretty much, the flame burned out. I think one time the recruiter contacted me and said, "Hey, I was just wondering if you were still interested." And at that point, I was just like, "No, I'm not." And then that's when I decided, all right, well, I'm just going to do this. Something clicked in my brain, and I gave the effort that I should have given football when I was in high school to MMA, or to fighting, and to boxing, and to all that. It hit me, it clicked, and the effort that I gave was outstanding. That's how I was able to improve so quickly. So then what happens is I go to AMA, and back then it was this big warehouse on Dog Track Road. It's a Brown Helicopter now, but big warehouse. And Larry used to have 30 fight cards in there. It was a really cool spot. And one of the coolest things about it was a big open floor plan, big open warehouse. And you had your boxing section, you had your MMA and grappling section, and the ring was dead center in the middle, and you could see everybody could see everybody. It was really cool. And I went in there, and a friend of mine who is fighting now, and he took some time off, I believe, and got his shit straight, and then he went back to fighting, and he's doing excellent. A friend of mine that I went to high school, I played football with, I weightlifted with, his name was Andy Santiago. Dude is one of the coolest people I've ever met. And he talked me into coming over there, and he told me the lowdown. Hey, listen, this coach that you're going to go meet, all about respect, you know, like, make sure you do this, make sure you mind your P's and Q's, yes sir, no sir, don't just leave, you know, talk to him before you leave, you know, all that things. And I took his advice. Well, Andy ended up having to move to Tallahassee, and so I was stuck there with nobody that I knew, and I just tried to become a member of the team. And back then, they were like a little more closed off, closed knit, right? You had to really come in and prove yourself. If you're, you know, when I came in, I was just some fat 18-year-old talking about how I wanted to fight, which, as I have grown up in this game and gotten skin in this game over the last 11 years, I know exactly what they were thinking when I came in there. Like, okay, whatever. Because I've heard it a million times since then. So I come in, you know, I explain to them what I'm wanting to do, and they're like, yeah, well, you just keep, you know, we'll do this. So I fell in love with grappling, and I wanted to grapple. I did not want to get punched in the face. Because like I said, I remember those days back when I was fighting in the backyard, or fighting over there in the field next to the house. That fucking hurt, man. And so I really didn't want to get punched in the face. I had gotten into quite a few fights in high school as well, and luckily all of them I was able to luckily in all those I was either able to strike first, or it was broken up before I was really ever punched in my face. Now, I knew being punched in the face wouldn't break me. I just didn't want to get punched in the face. I mean, who does? Your face is the first thing you protect most of the time. Unless you're a man, then you might protect your nuts first. That's just nature. Can't help that. But, so anyways, I stuck to it. Everybody thought I was going to quit. I stuck to it. I went out. I had no job, so I saved every bit of money that I could, doing every little thing I could. And I went out and I bought everything of a piece of equipment they told me to buy. And I came back and I was there every day, every day, every day, every day. Well, then one day, a couple months goes by, 2-3 months. And this guy that had been training there, Michael Roberts, he was making his pro debut. And I remember my coach, Todd Leiterman, which was the grappling coach. I remember, them all working together. There was Brian Smith was there, Chris Barron was there, Andre Hall was there. None of you guys may know their names, but they hold weight in the early stages of Pensacola MMA. Like they're all, they are all our Hoist Gracie, Dan Severn, Ken Shamrock, right? Obviously not on that same level, but for Pensacola, that's who those guys are. Amongst others, these are just the people at my gym. There were other gyms where guys were, like the Klecklers and the Rances and the Rio Stouses and all, those types of guys. Brandon Jenkins. So, anywho, me, Mike Roberts. Well, not me. I was new. Mike Roberts, Brian Smith, Chris Barron, Andre Hall. There was a few other names. Training Mike to do his thing. And he was fighting his pro debut. Listen to me. His pro debut against a guy that I'm pretty sure was 14-0 at the time. Okay. 14-0, and this guy is going to fight a debut guy in pro MMA. So he has this fight in Biloxi. And he goes in there. And he beats this guy. He hands this guy his first loss. And it was the guy's only loss until the guy got into the UFC and became pretty much a pretty decent, star when he was in there. Jason Knight. I don't know if that name rings a bell to anybody. But Mike Roberts on his pro debut went in there and beat Jason Knight. And he didn't get a quick oopsie daisies, I dropped my hand knockout in the first round, or oops, I wasn't expecting you to know this submission. No, he beat the guy 3-round decision. All 3 rounds. All 3 judges. 30-27. That is amazing. That's fucking awesome. So anyways, he goes over there, he does that. And the team's all happy and stuff. Well, there's a falling out at the gym, and they leave. Everybody. And I haven't even met Larry at this point. Other than one time to tell him, hey, yeah, he asked me to fight, and I'd only been training like a month. And I was like, no, because all those guys over there were telling me, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. So, I get to the gym and no one's there after the fight. And I come in for it may have been about 3 weeks, maybe 2.5, 3 weeks. Nobody's there. And all I'm doing is I'm shrimping, I'm bridging, I'm practicing kicks on the bag. I haven't even really been taught how to punch, so I'm like punching a little bit on the bag. And it's just a, comical. And Larry comes up to, so now Larry comes up to me, and at this point, I had been training right around 4 months or so. And Larry says, RJ, he says, hey, you want to fight September? And well, the guys hadn't been there in 3 weeks, and so I was like, sure, let's do it. And Larry's like, perfect. He says, you know what, I'll tell you what, do you work? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, be at my house at 9:30 at, whatever day. And he gave me his address. So I drive over to his house. There's a whole funny ass story about the first time I drove over to his house, but I'm not going to talk about it now. We'll talk about it later. And I get to his house and he starts training me in his home gym. Fucking everything I said about the other gym and how amazing it was, this one was even better. It wasn't as big. It was so close, tight knit, super like a small space. And when I say a small space, it was like a fucking 4 to 5 car garage. Like it wasn't. It was built for a gym, but it was about as big as a 5 car garage or so. It was a nice space, but there was a ring. Everything was perfectly spaced out. I mean, it was so just like, man, this looks like a gym from the movies. And so I'm like starstruck. So then me and Larry start working out, and he starts basically giving me private lessons. And we just clicked. Something about him and I just clicked. And of course, myself, my whole life had been looking for a father figure, and I'm pretty sure, and that's what Larry became to me, was just a great father figure. And from there, I started fighting. So I had my first fight, and I won by submission. And then I'm in the gym training one day, and Larry comes in there and asks, hey, would you like to fight that giant that fought the same night you did? Didn't have a name, nothing. I was like, sure. And that was it. And then we trained, and that turned out to be Dakota Merritt. Well, I lost that fight by decision. Okay. It was my second MMA fight. So then my third one, I won that fight. Then my fourth, I won. Then my fifth, I won. Or maybe it was my fifth, I lost to Kim Odie, which is another name that y'all might or might not know. I lost to him by decision. And then after that, just mine and Larry's relationship was getting better. Mine and Todd's relationship was getting better. I was training every single day. I was training my ass off. And now we're talking, it's been a couple of years. And now I go on like a 6-fight, just first round finish against tough guys. Against guys that are going 3-round wars with other tough guys. And it was the coaching, and it was the training I was getting and how much I was putting into it. Then I meet this girl, as every story goes, and she was very distracting to me. And I was really fixated on this girl and spending a lot of time. And she lived like an hour away from me. And more or less, it wasn't who she was, and it wasn't anything other than that. It was just more or less I was getting some attention finally, because I was always big. Like I said, I was 257 pounds when I graduated. And so I was never a ladies' man. Not that I was a ladies' man then, because now I'm still like 235, 240 on any given day. But so I didn't fight as much. And I did have a hard time there for a while finding fights. I had one guy, Jonathan Miller, that backed out on me like 5 times. Like, it's ridiculous. Don't say yes if you're going to back out. And that's why now, like, I won't fight anybody that's done backed out on me more than twice. A bitch is a bitch. So then I just stopped fighting as regular, really letting this girl distract me, letting my little head do the thinking instead of my big one. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on and why I'm not getting what I want. Not realizing it's my own self with the gun pointing it at my foot. Finally, I get rid of that girl. And Larry had just had basically a sit down with me, because I had turned down a training session with some people that had come by the gym, that had come in town. And I was like, no, I got to do this. And I lied to him. I said, I got to go help my grandpa. And Larry's not stupid at all. And so he calls me out. He says, listen, he says, you want to turn pro and you want to do these things, and you're not acting like a pro. He says, you're lying to your coach. You're hanging out with that girl. She's taking you away from something that you're trying to pursue. And I have people here that would do nothing but benefit you. So he says, until you're ready to show me that you are willing to put in the effort and the work and everything that it takes to do what you're doing, I'm not turning you pro. You can fight 15 more times as an amateur for all I care. And it kind of woke me up, like, a lot. And that sequence of events is I get rid of that girl. I get her done with, whatever, we're done. I stopped talking to her and then in the gym. And then within 3-4 weeks of getting rid of her, within the month, I had a pro fight. Now, Larry's the one that got me the pro fight. So I'm on my way home because I was living in the gym. I had been living in the gym for about 1.5 years now. I think I am 22. I might be 21. I think I'm 22. And so I'm driving to the gym driving home / gym from work. And Larry calls me and he says, "Hey, I got you a pro fight." And I'm like, "What? That's awesome." And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, against who? Where? What weight?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity. You need to, I'm excited. We're going to do this. We're going to train our asses off. Um, we're going to train in the morning before work. We're going to train at night." And I was like, "All right, cool. Awesome. Like, who is it? And what weight?" Well, it's going to be at heavyweight. Now, I know we've been trying to lose weight because now at this point, I know I'm jumping around. I'm trying not to go super, super into detail because I don't want to have an hour-long podcast for just this little bit of my story. But at this point, I had lost a lot of weight. I had my last amateur fight in September, and this talk is going on in February. So I'd had my last amateur fight in September, and that's the one where I had my first light heavyweight fight because I had lost a bunch of weight, and I had weighed in at 198 pounds, and I fought this guy, Leonard Williams, who at the time was a fucking murderer. And he probably still is. He just isn't active anymore. But he was a murderer. And I had a nice, hard-fought battle with him. I took one on the chin. He concussed the fuck out of me, but I still won the fight. And I had to take like 3 months of like no to low impact training. And yeah, so I had lost weight. We decided I was going to try to go to 185. Well, anyways, fast forward, we're in February. I'm at like 195 pounds naturally, just dieting, losing weight, all that. Pretty sure I hit a growth spurt too, like my last growth spurt, because I really, really leaned out of nowhere. And so I say, "Okay, well, that's not a big deal. I'll be faster than them." And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "So who is it and where is it?" "It's going to be Island Fights, and it's going to be the main event at Island Fights." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "Who is it?" "Well, it's Shante Williams." And for those of you who don't know, Shante Williams is a former NFL player, Atlanta Falcon, Green Bay Packer, 6'8", 6'8". He was 155, 160 pounds, something, 258 pounds or 48 pounds, something like that. And I was like, and dude looks like a fucking god, by the way. Looks like a Greek god chiseled out of marble. And I'm like, "Oh." And Larry's like, "Don't you fucking owe me. This is the time. This is our opportunity. You wanted it. This is it. You're going to beat this motherfucker's ass. I'm telling you, I know fighting. I know how this goes. You're going to fucking do it. You've got this." So I'm like, it takes convincing, but we do it. Call my coach Todd. Doesn't even take convincing. He's more like, "What the fuck? Why would you do that? What the fuck? Now we got to train our asses off." And Todd and Larry poured their hearts and their souls into me for 6 fucking weeks of every day, every morning, every night, 5 fucking days a week. And on my rest day, I was doing mitts with Larry. That training there was UFC caliber training. And I know I've been to UFC gyms. I had UFC caliber training for that fight. I go and I beat him, right? Everybody else turned their backs on us except for one guy, Robert Turnquest. He didn't turn his back on me. He came to Larry's and trained with me. Everybody else turned their fucking backs on us. Everybody. They told Larry he was fucking crazy, that he was going to get me killed. They told They told me that I was going to get killed. I mean, training partners, people I had sparred with to help them get ready for their fights every Sunday and come there every Tuesday, every Thursday to do grappling at another gym. These people that had left when Larry had the falling out with Mike Roberts. I had went over there with them. Mike Roberts by this time was not in town. Otherwise, I know he'd have been there with me too, because Mike's that type of guy. Mike was always one of my biggest fans, Mike Roberts. And we don't talk like we should, and we are not as close as we used to be. But me and Mike Roberts always got along great, and I just want to throw that out there for anybody listening. That dude is an amazing dude, and I believe he's a freaking doctor now and still kicking ass. But Mike Roberts never turned his back on me. He was out of town, or he was somewhere else, because he wasn't in the picture. Because had he had been, he would have been there for me, because that's how serious he took it. He used to take me to, just a little sidetrack, whenever they did break off a few years before that, I would train with Larry like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but Tuesdays and Thursdays we would go over to the doghouse in Alberta, which was Todd's place. It was a fucking badass little, like shed, but shed's like not the real correct term because it makes you think of like a shack, but it was like it was like an outside, freestanding place, but it had walls, roof, all that, mats and all that. So shed, for lack of a better term. And dude, Mike Roberts would pick me up. I'd meet him at a place. He'd pick me up. He'd drive me there, and he'd take me back to my car. And he never had to do that, ever. Not one time. And so I know him and Turnquest were the only ones that didn't, because he did message me a few times about it. But everybody else did. And me, Todd, and Larry went and we beat Shante Williams. And we beat him in the first round. Todd drilled with me a combo for 6 weeks. A jab, see what they do, then an outside leg kick, a left body kick, and a right high kick. We drilled that on the fucking Thai pads every night for 6 weeks, amongst other combinations, but that was the one we drilled. And a minute, 30 seconds, maybe it was 2 minutes into the fucking fight, into the first round, I had already slipped a spinning back fist the guy threw, slammed him on his back. And then he got on top of me. He rolled me because I got excited and tried to jump for a submission. And he rolled on top of me. And he stood up because he thought I did jiu-jitsu. So when we stood up, it took a few seconds. And then what did I do? What I trained for the last 6 weeks. Jab. He stayed there. Outside leg kick. Left body kick. He tried to throw a jab at me over the top of that left body kick. When he threw his jab, he dropped his hand and I kicked him in his fucking neck. Because I had been trained to do that. He goes down, and my perspective, it happens so quick that it's like you can't even have time to think this way. But when he went down, I was like, where the fuck did he go? Because I didn't throw the kick hard. It was perfect placement from perfect coaching. That was all my coaches. I could not have done that without Todd Leiterman. I could not have done that without Larry Downs Jr. 100%. And all my training partners that were there for me. And he goes down. I hop on top of him. Everybody's yelling, be calm. I'm elbowing him in the face. And he rolls right into a choke. Boom. I cinch it in. He taps. Place is going. Dude, people were standing on top of tables. Fucking roof blew off that place. It was awesome, man. It was one of the best, greatest feelings ever. And I'm happy, and I'm excited, and I'm fucking awesome. But I'm not a party guy, so I don't go to the after party, which I fucking totally should have. But I didn't go to the after party. So I'm driving home, and I'm going down the bridge on W Street from Garden to W, or Garden to Old Corey Field or New Warrington or whatever that road is there. And I'm going over, and my buddy's next to me. And he looks over at me and he revs his engine. And then as we're going, we're going at a high rate of speed, but we're not racing. But then I rev mine as a joke, and he's looking at me, just kind of like, whatever, we're going like the speed limit. And he looks over at me, and because he's looking at me, his car starts veering closer to mine. And I like swerve out, and then he freaks the fuck out. And he jerks his fucking wheel dude, hard to the left, which made him fucking start fishtailing. And then he pit maneuvers me. So I start fucking tail spinning in a whirl, like a little fucking tornado. And I come to a stop, and the motherfucker T-bones me. And when he hits, he presses on the accelerator out of panic and keeps fucking driving into me. I had just met this girl in a brand new fucking car, dude, and wrecked her shit. And fucking on the way home from the biggest fight of my life. Oh man, it was fun. And that was my best friend, like one of my childhood best friends, dude. What the fuck? And now, ever since then, because his parents, because of him, we haven't talked. Like, just a few text messages since then. And I ain't holding no grudge. But all right, guys, that's already over 30 minutes, and there's still so much more to the story. I haven't even gotten to the major parts of why my career derailed after this. So stay tuned. I will release another story time. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much. You've been in the Neutral Corner with RJ Summerlin. Godspeed.